各位线上的观众朋友，大家好，我是外贸协会林一瑶，欢迎收看全球市场趋势线上研讨会。讲到韩国的企业发展，大家一定马上想到三星、现代等大型集团。这些财阀在政府的培植及有计划的发展下，在最近20年间席卷了全球的市场，成为各领域的领导品牌。但实际上，韩国有超过80%的就业人口是在中小企业里面工作，为韩国贡献了将近40%的出口比重，其重要性不言而喻。今天的新创发展俨然成为了各国的国力竞赛。韩国政府早在90年代就已经意识到新创在产业永续发展中的重要性，在20多年的建设下，已经逐渐看到了成绩。2020年 StartUps Genome 的报告中，韩国首尔以空降之姿紧追日本东京，成为东亚地区最重要的新创城市之一。这次外贸协会请到了韩国新创创业发展院 KISED 的资深顾问 Kyung， 以及加速器 SparkLabs 的高级经理 Kang Seen Young， 为我们说明韩国新创生态系的发展。首先，我们请韩国新创创业发展院 KISED 的资深顾问 Mr. Kyung 以国家新创政策执行单位的角度，分析韩国新创生态系及政策。
Hello, my name is Chris, and I'm currently working as an advisor at the Korea Institute of Startup and Entrepreneurship, which is KISED. I am honored to present today's topic, Korean Startup Ecosystem and Policy, for 2021 Taiwan-Korea Startup Online Forum. First, I will explain why startup is important and how Korean startup ecosystem has been developed for the last decade and startup policy. Some keywords for startup are venture, innovation, scalability, high rate of failure. Then why go into venture or startup when there is a high risk? Because startup has an employment effect. In the United States, jobs in startups which are 10 years old or younger as a share of all tech-based employment has been 33% during the period of 2007 to 2016. And 6% of tech-based startups experience high employment growth, employment of more than 25% year on year. And high growth startups employed 100,000 workers on average. Also in Korea, SMEs, including micro business and small-sized enterprises, cover almost 88% of the total employment. And startups contributed 37% of total net employment in 2011. The contribution rate varies from 30% to 154% during 2007 and 2011. The second reason that startup is important is that it changes the life and lifestyle. Disruptive innovation changes not only economy, but human life itself. These are the essential products for agriculture, rain gauge and sundial in the 15th century of Korea, at the time called Joseon. We can easily assume that these were quite innovative products at the time. These days, people buy Tesla, but Thomas Edison already developed an electric car in 1912, but due to some unknown reason, Edison and Ford dropped the electric car project in 1914. Industry also changed from cottage industry, simple assembly by human labor, and mass production by machine. These days, we are handling smartphones, drones, big data, virtual reality, autonomous vehicle, and robots. And now startups are leading the major change. Reusable rocket in the United States, autonomous vessel in Northern Europe. And some Korean startups are developing or already went into market with products like virtual reality avatar meeting system and use of a drone in construction sites. Before explaining about Korean startup ecosystem, what is startup ecosystem? A startup ecosystem is a complex but very flexible organic system, and basic factors like ideas, inventions and research, startups, entrepreneurs, team members, investors, and mentors are in place to participate. And surrounding are, and at the same time in this ecosystem are support organizations, big companies, universities, funding organizations, service providers, and research organizations. Today, I would like to explain to you about 8 factors of Korean startup ecosystem: economy, R&D and commercialization, infrastructure, government support system, entrepreneurship, players, investment, and startups. Korean economy, since the Korean War, can be divided into 3 periods: a foreign aid era, heavy industry growth era, and innovation era. In 1960s and 1970s, most of the industries were developed for the first time, such as automobile, steel, shipbuilding, and petrochemicals. And in the 1980s, industries like such as semiconductors, CDMA, and smartphones followed. When Korean War ended in 1953, the country was devastated, and former agriculture leading industry had to convert to manufacturing centered economy. You can see from the graph that the portion of agriculture, forestry, and fishery went down from 40% to 13% in the 1980s. While manufacture and mining grew rapidly from 12% to 30%. What made this possible? Korea, like Taipei, needs to focus on export, but there were no competitive products, no capital, not to mention plant and equipment, and human resources, and capital eventually to have a virtuous cycle. The answers were long-term plan with science and technology research to develop technology, invitation of think tank from mostly studied in the United States to provide human resources with quality, foreign loans and financial favors to economic entities to promote capital expansion. So with strong backup from the President of Korea, KISED, Korea Institute of Science and Technology, was founded in 1966. KISED has developed almost everything, such as color TV, aramid fiber, VCR headroom, optical fiber, even doping control technology. KISED has also played a major role in planning on mechanical engineering development, heavy industry, and biomedical industry. The head of research complex, a concentration of R&D was also constructed in 1973, where 26 government-funded research institutes, over 1,600 enterprises, 68,000 researchers are working. The complex started with national R&D strategy and eventually moved to public-private partnership R&D for sustainable growth. As a result, Korea is evaluated as the most innovative nation in the world by the World Bank this year. R&D intensity, total expenditure on R&D divided by the nation's GDP, is on the second top. Top three industries for R&D are electricity and electronics, about almost 26%, machinery 18%, and ICT 17%. Both amount and ratio of R&D to GDP has grown to reach the highest level in the world. The government first initiated to nurture R&D investment, but later, since 1982, R&D by private companies exceeded that of public institutes, comprising 80% of the total in 2018. But when R&D success ratio records average 18.7%, commercialization rate anchors at less than 50%. The government is now changing the evaluation criteria concerning R&D performance. Since patents and market-centered commercialization are very important factors for startup, KISED provides combined support package consisting of mentoring, commercialization, and R&D. The third component is infrastructure. I will introduce to you two major legislation acts concerning startup and venture. Support for Small and Medium Enterprise Establishment Act was first established in 1986, which defines startup, business incubator, and accelerator recently. The Act defines accelerator and business incubator. The major difference between accelerator and business incubator are that an accelerator invests in business startups at early stage. Act on special measures for the promotion of venture business was established in 1997, which defines venture and venture certification system. Venture may have tax benefits, preferences when going to IPO, when applied patent, when applied to be guaranteed by technology evaluation, space benefits, etc. The first venture generation was mainly telecommunication companies, hotel companies, and game companies. Successful cases are Daum, Naver, NCSoft, Nexon, and NeoWiz. The first venture boom started in 1998 and collapsed in 2000 in the stock market. Looking at SpaceX's infrastructure, technology incubator was first introduced in 1980s, but the first incubator was run by private in 1993. Currently, 256 incubators are registered to the government, where startups can use the space at a discount rate and receive management and technical assistance, including mentoring, networking, investment linkage, etc. Currently, there are 19 centers for creative economy and innovation. These are regional centers where conglomerates like Samsung, LG, Hyundai, SK, etc. are doing private-public cooperation. The major functions of these centers are to nurture early-stage startups focused on specific regional industries. For example, Kakao, located in Jeju Island, focuses on software and tourism industry and cooperates with startups in these areas. The fourth component is the government support system. You can see at the center the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, or MSS, and there are 9 major public institutions that are supporting SMEs and startups. KISED, where I belong, supports tech-based startups with education, mentoring, commercialization, R&D linkage, and investment linkage. KV works together with venture capitals and matching government-funded fund of funds. GIVO is a guarantee organization based on technology evaluation. And CORAC is a credit guarantee organization for micro businesses. COSME provides loans and startups and SMEs. And TIPA is an R&D support organization for startup and SMEs. Other organizations like SBDC, COSB, CMAS are also supporting organizations for startup and SMEs. As we had a brief overview of the Korean economy in the previous slide, the first industrial leaders led by Hyundai and Samsung are enough to be called first pioneers or first generation. As the second generation, entrepreneurs can be called the first venture generation that emerged in 1990s. Their businesses were internet-based portals and games. These CEOs are now in their middle ages. Players. The ministry and KISED started supporting prominent startups in 2009. Since the characteristic of startup ecosystem is largely dependent upon its players, KISED put emphasis on building up and cooperating with various players. Currently, KISED has more than 400 partners, including universities, public institutes, private companies, accelerators, venture capitals, associations, etc. These are some samples of individual program partners of KISED. We also have various global partners worldwide: United States, UK, France, Singapore, China, India, Vietnam, etc. Now let's look into investment in Korea. As you can see the graph, angel investment in Korea has been staggering after the first venture boom, but has recovered and recorded new high in 2018, total amount of about $500 million. Venture capital amount is also recording new highs, recording $3.8 billion in 2020. By sector, the largest investment was made in biomedical industry, about 28%, followed by ICT service, 25%, distribution and service area, about 17%. Private accelerators have invested over $200 million during the period of 2017 and 2020. The total investment in startups in 2020 was $4.5 billion, and it seems that the amount of investment will increase constantly in the near future. The last component of the startup ecosystem is startups. In 2020, according to statistics by Startup Alliance, there are 203 Korean startups that have valuations over 10 million US dollars. Industries vary from e-commerce and logistics, contents and information, healthcare, fintech, mobility, etc. As of July last year, according to CB Insights data, there are 11 unicorns in Korea. United States and China cover almost 70% of the total unicorn companies, followed by UK, India, Germany, and Korea. Now I will explain to you briefly startup policy of Korea. From 1997 to 2007, the government has set a legal foundation, mostly indirect measures to support venture companies. In this period, the government defined startup as a business for less than 7 years. Act on special measures for the promotion of venture businesses was established in 1997, which defines venture and venture certification system. To be a venture in Korea, one has to meet a certain requirements, such as invested by venture capitals or a certain standard of R&D expenses or a certain standard of guarantee. The government also stressed on supporting ventures with space, supporting mostly universities and research institutes, building up incubator buildings. From 2008 to 2012, policy focused on nurturing startup-friendly environment. For example, government-wide measures have been taken to simplify incorporation procedure. Before using online incorporation system, one had to go through 8 steps to incorporate, and it took 14 days in 2009. The procedure and time was shortened to 2 steps and 5 days in 2011. KISED was established in 2008, and from 2009, KISED launched 3 major programs to support startups. These programs were basically to support startups with the government grants. When a startup submits a business plan, evaluation committee is organized, and the committee selects prominent startups based on technology, marketability, revenue model, team members, etc. And the selected startups can use the government grant with whatever they need, such as mentoring, technological improvements, product and service development, or improvements, intellectual property registration, overseas exhibition, etc. So this support policy is basically that the government herself works as much like an angel investor, except the condition that she does not require any equity from the startup. Selected startups never have to pay back. From the year 2013, the policy focused on building up virtuous cycle of startup and venture. That is to strengthen the cycle of startup, growth, collection, and reinvestment. Also, focus on early stage funding by angels, and regional innovation system was built. To build up the virtuous cycle, TIPS or Technology Incubator Program for Startup was launched in 2013 and further developed to be a representative program in Korea. I will explain TIPS in detail later. Recently, the policy is likely to put more emphasis on performance of the support. Also, for startups to find out more profitable opportunity and for big companies to find more innovative opportunities, more and more open innovation cases are emerging. For example, some insurance companies recently began to sell pet insurance for dogs and cats. This business model was initiated by some startups. Many big companies like Samsung, Hyundai, LG, POSCO hold startup events and demo days to induce cooperation with startup and find an innovation opportunity combined with corporate venture investment. Currently, there are 21 programs implemented by the KISED. Here I will explain some representative programs. In Korea, startups are under 7 years old after incorporation or registration, and up to 3 years are defined as early stage, whereas over 3 years to 7 years are defined as growth stage. For growth stage startups, KISED provides a package program including commercialization, R&D linkage, product improvement, export, distribution, and IPO. Also, once accepted after business plan evaluation, a startup can have opportunities in cooperations with top-tier global companies such as Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Amazon. These top-tier companies help startups with consulting, seminar, marketing, networking, and demo day. TIPS is one of the representative programs for startups. First, the government selects qualified accelerators. If an accelerator invests more than about 100,000 US dollars to a startup, the government reviews the status of startup applications and can match up to 700,000 US dollars plus additional 200,000 US dollars matching fund. So TIPS is basically a private-public joint program, and it means that once a startup has an investment record from the private investors, the government regards that startup as prominent and matches funding with R&D, commercialization, overseas marketing, and additional funds. Since 2013, over about 1,200 startups has been selected and recorded 3.3 billion US dollars investment, and there were over 20 successful exit cases. We just had 5 IPOs last week. To facilitate providing information, KISED runs an online platform under the brand of K-Startup. The website provides most of the information concerning support programs, online education, space, events, etc. Almost everything regarding startup support programs. Last year, there were over 6 million visitors and over 100,000 online incorporations. It is not easy to present an objective evaluation upon how the policy has contributed to startup ecosystem, because there are so many factors that influence the ecosystem. As I explained to you, I can say that factors such as R&D, startup infrastructure, investment, startup activities have been very much upgraded in the last decade. It is true that startup network has been rapidly developed for the past decade, but measurement of network effect would be a very complex matter. So I just would like to show you just one indicator, the survival ratio from KISED standpoint. Since 2009, KISED has supported about 40,000 startups with sales amount of about 10 billion US dollars, 78,000 employees, and over 600 high growth startups. Looking at the survival ratio compared to that of general startups, KISED supported startups record at least more than 20% point survival ratio. So this means that even if the government act as an angel investor and they invest in startups, and the effect comes that the supported startups live longer and they can survive. Okay, thank you very much for listening. Please stay safe. And if you have any questions, I'll be online on the 23rd of March to answer you, or I'd be glad to answer you by email. Thank you. Bye-bye.
在看完 Mr. Lee 深入浅出的讲解后，各位对韩国新创生态系的发展及环境应该已经有所认识了。接下来我们请 Mr. Kang Seen Young 看看来自美国矽谷的加速器 SparkLabs 是如何在韩国运作的。
Hello, my name is Mikey Kang, currently a senior manager at SparkLabs Korea. Today, I would like to introduce you to the startup ecosystem of South Korea and what we SparkLabs do in the startup ecosystem. So I want to start with the snapshot of South Korea. Even though all of our SparkLabs partners grew up and started their own company in the United States, they decided to start a startup accelerator in South Korea. And this is because that they believe Korea would be an ideal environment for startups to grow. Korea has the highest smartphone penetration in the world. We also have the highest 4G LTE penetration in the world. And we first commercialized the 5G service all around the world. And not only because of these technological advances, we also have one of the biggest markets in the world. We have the fifth largest e-commerce market in the world, and seventh largest personal luxury goods market. And we're also home to two of the most largest mobile phone makers in the world. Also, South Korea was ranked #1 most innovative nation on Bloomberg's Innovation Index for 5 years. And this is mainly due to major tech companies that made the first products faster than any other company in the world. So if you can see, Nexon made the first MMORPG in the world, Cyworld, first major social network in the world, Kakao mobile messaging platform in the world, and so on. So this might kind of feel like that I'm bragging South Korea, but just wanted to tell you that South Korea is actually quite an ideal environment for startups to grow. So investors are now looking for the next startup that'll be the first in the world. And to find the next #1 startup in the world, actually venture investments in Korea rapidly grew. So more than 1,600 companies received over $4 billion in 2019. But then, as you know, COVID-19 made everything stop. And we thought venture investments would also freeze during the pandemic. And it actually did. So during the first half of 2020, 17% decreased in terms of venture investments compared to the first half of 2019. But then there were always good startups out there, and startup couldn't stop because stop means death to startups. And venture investments also didn't stop. So venture investments bounced back up on the second half, which in result, compared to 2019, 2020's total amount of investment and also total number of investments exceeded that of 2019. So now we can see that South Korea's venture investments rapidly grew during the last 5 years. But this means that startups now have more opportunities to fundraise money whenever they need to. But does this mean that more startups succeed? South Korea's survival rate of startups is almost a half of that of the United States. And if we look at the reason why startups fail, it's mostly because of no market needs. If you look at the graph, you can see that ignoring customers is the #1 reason why startups fail. But ignoring customers actually means that they made a product without listening to the market. And that actually means that they didn't listen to the market needs, which means that what they actually built has no market needs. So it's usually not about the money. It's about how fast they find the market needs of a product, or how fast they make a product that matches a certain market needs, or it can be both. So we call this the valley of death. So releasing a product is actually not the end for a startup. It's the start of a startup's journey. They have to keep on make small and big pivots until they find the right product for the right market. And this means that they have to find the product market fit during the Death Valley period. So this is what accelerators do. Accelerators help startups find this product market need. Y Combinator is the most successful startup accelerator in the world. Founded in 2005, they invested in more than 3,000 startups, and more than 25 YC alumni are valued over $1 billion. YC is also an investor of Airbnb and Dropbox. And they're not just one of the investors of Airbnb and Dropbox, they're one of the earliest investors of Airbnb and Dropbox. So they help these companies actually find their product market fit and help these companies grew before they were able to grow on their own. So we, SparkLabs, were founded in 2020. And when we were first founded back in 2012, there wasn't any major accelerator in Korea. And we believed that we could adopt the same model as YC and give Korean startups an opportunity to grow quickly through specialized mentorship and training. So at this point, some of you might think accelerators is similar to incubators, but I want to point out that acceleration and incubation is not the same thing. So incubators help bring a business idea to reality. So by assisting with building the basic foundation of a business, they actually help bringing just a simple idea to an actual product. So they help things like building the early team, also seed funding, or offering them office space so that they can build the first product. But acceleration focuses on growth. We don't help them make their first product. We help them grow as fast as they can. So if you look at this graph, of course, startups can grow without acceleration, but we help save their time and grow faster so that they can raise money on a large scale. Then how do we help them grow faster? It's through these 4 steps we offer them. So the first step, we seed invest in the company, minimum $50K up to $100K. And also we offer a 16-week program where we actually help them set up their KPIs and help them find their product market fit. And also we offer a network where startup founders can actually get help from other big companies or other investors so that they can grow faster. So our program goal is actually to help the startups focus on building a product or talking to users, which means, again, help them find the product market fit as fast as they can. So let's dive more deep into what product market fit is. Product market fit might not feel so familiar with you. So we start with the numbers. And more specifically, we talk about KPIs. So KPI, which means Key Performance Index. At the beginning of the program, we help teams set up their KPIs. And this might sound pretty easy. So let's start with try setting up a KPI for the Korea's largest entertainment company called JYP. So because JYP entertainment company, JYP's KPI might be total number of fans, total number of audiences, total concert ticket sales, or anything else. So there can be a lot of different KPIs, but just picking the right KPI for us is quite harder than you think. And in JYP's case, JYP's most meaningful KPI is the number of albums sold. And this is because only the most loyal fans of the artist buy actual albums, which leads directly to other revenue streams like concert ticket sales. So for JYP, just focusing on increasing the number of albums sold would be the fastest way to grow and also grow the revenue of all different sales. So as I told you, KPI in general can be things like revenue, retention, daily active users, monthly active users, conversion rate, or etc. But for early stage startups, we also ask them to identify another metric. And this other metric is called the North Star metric. And this is the single metric that best captures the core value that your product delivers to customers. So for example, for Facebook, the North Star metric for Facebook is monthly active users. And for Slack, it's daily active users. And Airbnb, it's the number of nights booked. So once the startups define their own North Star metrics, for the last step, we ask them to identify their aha moments. So this aha moment is when the users actually feel the most value out of our product and keep on using it. So once we may identify what makes our users stay, we then can focus on increasing users that feels the aha, and increase retention, create viral effect, and lower the cost of customer acquisition. So for example, Facebook. Facebook identified that their users feel the most value out of their platform when they successfully add 7 friends within 10 days. And for Slack, it was sending 2,000 messages, which means users who add 7 friends in 10 days or send 2,000 messages gets the value out of the product than any other users. So after identifying these aha moments, Facebook and Slack would do everything that would make users add at least 7 friends in 10 days or send 2,000 messages. Facebook and Slack is quite a big company, so you might not get the point, but if we take an example from our actual portfolio company, we had a company called Lab Manager, which is a laboratory management solution. And their aha moment was registering 100 chemical reagents. And in order to help users register 100 reagents as quickly as possible, they would offer services like importing the existing Excel database into the platform. And once the 100 reagents are registered, the user would experience the convenience of the platform and would not switch back to their old ways of managing their supplies. And for another company called Wave, which makes a video chat platform, their aha moment was adding at least 1 friend on the first day. So their North Star metric was the day 1 retention. And if you look at this graph, you can see that if the users actually add more friends, they stay on the platform longer than the user who doesn't add friends on the first day. So this is how they set it up their aha moments, and they did everything so that the users can add friends on their first day on the platform. So after finding this product market fit through these indexes, we offer the largest demo day in the world to our startups. And in 2019, around 5,000 people globally attended our demo day event. And among them were investors, government officials, as well as high-level executives from some of the large corporations in Korea. And they not just only attend our demo day, they actually invest in these corporates, and investors actually invest in our startups. For example, GE, Cisco, Goldman Sachs, Tencent, and all of these big companies attend our demo day and actually invest in our startups. So at SparkLabs, we believe that entrepreneurs grow entrepreneurs. So all of our 4 partners at SparkLabs Korea are entrepreneurs, and they understand exactly the kinds of dilemmas and choices that our entrepreneurs face, because they actually have been there. And over the past 8 years, we invested in more than $15 million into 178 young startups. And our alumni boast 68% follow-on funding rate, demonstrating their potential to attract investment and scale their businesses once they graduate from our program. So you can see that they raised over $700 million, and their total value is estimated at over $2 billion. We not only invest in Korean companies, and we created SparkLabs Global Ventures to provide follow-on funding for our accelerator alumni companies, and also to invest in early stage companies globally. And to offer extensive global network support for any of our startups who wants to expand globally. Our partners are founders from around the world. So starting from Seoul, we have partners in Singapore, also in Hong Kong, London, San Francisco, and it's not in this in this slide, but we also have partners in Taipei. And since December 2013, our SparkLabs Global Ventures has invested in 60 companies around the world. With our co-investors, such as Y Combinator, Techstars, and also big VCs like SoftBank and Andreessen Horowitz. So some of you might be interested in what kind of portfolios we have, what kind of startups we actually invested in. So if I give you a brief highlight of some of the startups we actually invested in, MiniBox, which started out as a beauty subscription box service in Korea, and soon expanded to the US. They are now a multi-brand beauty commerce company with over $180 million in funding. Also, we have Genoplan, which is a DNA analysis startup, which raised over $15 million in funding from investors including SoftBank or Samsung Ventures. We have Mango Plate, which is one of the most popular restaurant recommendation platforms in Korea. Actually, a lot of the Koreans don't use the Google recommendations. They use Mango Plate when they search for restaurants. And we also have Lifesum, a Swedish digital healthcare startup that offers personalized diet plans, and Andela, which builds remote engineering teams who received investment from Mark Zuckerberg. And here you can see that we invest in successful teams globally from LA, San Francisco, and also Tel Aviv. So we also started creating a global accelerator network by partnering with local governments, university, and corporations. So not only in the US, we have SparkLabs Beijing, which launched in April 2017, which is partnered with CITIC Guan Academy. And we also have SparkLabs FinTech, a FinTech accelerator in Hong Kong, and SparkLabs Energy based on Oman. And we also have SparkLabs Cultivate, an agri-tech accelerator based in Australia. We also have SparkLab Connex, based in Singapore, which specializes in IoT, smart city, and prop tech startups. And we also started to go down to students by launching our first university accelerator program, SparkLabs Frontier, at Arizona State University. And more further down, we also have SparkLabs Academy, which offers IoT, AI, robotics, and AR/VR education to young students and adults. And of course, most importantly, we have SparkLabs Taipei, which has an $8 million fund and is sector agnostic like Korea. So if you're interested in SparkLabs Taipei, they have their own fund. They invest in all different sectors. And they just successfully launched their 4th demo day last November. So if you're also interested in that demo day, you can watch all those videos in YouTube. So if you go into YouTube and search for SparkLabs Taipei, there's the demo day videos. So you've seen we consist of a number of global accelerators with their own funds, as well as venture capital funds that offer early stage funding to startups. And they all work together to provide a thriving global ecosystem for startups and entrepreneurs. So at SparkLabs, we believe that the future is data, and we actually invest in startups that have data. And regardless of the sector and location, we look for companies that might generate, accumulate, or analyze valuable data. So if you think that you're generating or accumulating or analyzing valuable data, feel free to contact us and hope we can have a good partnership throughout your journey as a startup. Thank you so much for listening.
不管您在新创生态系中扮演什么样的角色，希望都能够从这一次的研讨会中得到启发。如果对贸协的活动有什么建议，或是想要与我们一起开拓海外市场，欢迎透过影片上方的QR code 留下讯息。感谢今天的参与，我们下次见。